episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of our show with another fascinating guest who is helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us. As a little background, my family and I love to take great road trips, primarily up and down the East Coast of the United States. And that's why I'm so excited about our guest today, because we are honored to be joined by Stephanie Stuckey, businesswoman, environmental lawyer, former 14-year member of the Georgia House of Representatives, former Director of Sustainability and Chief Resilience Officer for the City of Atlanta, and current Chief Executive Officer of the Stuckeys Corporation, which is a roadside convenience store chain found through highways throughout the United States, primarily concentrated in the Southeast, Southwest, and Midwest, although their operations have existed as far east as Connecticut, as far west as Oregon. Ms. Stuckey received both her undergraduate degree and her law degree from the University of Georgia. She was a cum laude graduate of the University of Georgia School of Law in 1992, and she served as a public defender and then went into private practice before she was elected to the Georgia General Assembly in 1999. She served as a state representative from the Decatur area for 14 years, during which time she was a member of the Judiciary and Natural Resources Committees. She then went on to serve as Executive Director of GreenLaw, which is an Atlanta-based public interest law firm dedicated to giving Georgia's environment its day in court. In 2015, she was appointed by Mayor Kasim Reed to the Director of Sustainability for the City of Atlanta. In 2016, she was named Chief Resilience Officer. She was also Director of Sustainability Services for a group called Southface Institute, which is an Atlanta-based environmental nonprofit. And then in 2019, she became the third-generation Chief Executive Officer of Stuckeys Corporation, where she has been focusing on a variety of things, including store growth, discussing the health benefits of pecans, and ultimately supporting the importance of the Great American Road Trip in our society. Stephanie Stuckey, thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come talk to us for a bit.
Thanks, Sarah. What a great introduction. I feel like I'm on an episode of This Is Your Life. Having flashbacks, all my different careers.
Oh, boy.
I think I'm at my last stop on the highway of life with Stuckeys.
It's an exciting
absolutely
one.
Intended or analogy intended.
Well, it's a fascinating story, and I'd love if we typically start off by giving our guests the floor just for a little bit to talk about themselves. But if you could take us back a little bit, just to a little bit of your story, sort of where you grew up, how you got interested in law, and a little bit of your earlier career, and maybe sort of why you didn't go into the family business early on. I think that'd be a great way to start things off.
Sure, happy to. So I'm originally from Eastman, Georgia, which is where Stuckeys was founded in 1937. So that's my hometown. My dad was elected to Congress when I was a year old. So my growing up years were very much like country mouse, city mouse. We spent every summer in middle Georgia and campaigning every other year. And actually, if you get elected every 2 years, you're pretty much always campaigning. So we were constantly down in Georgia, involved with my dad's political career. And then I actually went to school in Washington, D.C. When my dad got out of Congress, we even stayed in D.C. My mom especially did not want to go back to small town South Georgia after seeing how much fun the District of Columbia can be. It's a wonderful place to grow up. And then I went to college at the University of Georgia, undergrad in law school, practiced law for quite a while, did criminal defense, and got elected to the legislature, got very involved with the policy end of laws and enjoyed making laws and not just practicing the law. And got interested in environmental issues through my service in the legislature. My district had a lot of environmental advocates, so to be representative, I got more engaged. It was an issue that had always been of interest to me and a passion of mine. And then I got out of politics the best way to get out of politics. I did not run for re-election. So it's always nice if you can leave a career or a job on your own terms. And so I was very fortunate. I got tired of partisanship, and that's something we frankly have seen a lot of lately. So I really didn't like the divisiveness of politics. And so I ran an environmental nonprofit law firm, So nonprofit law firm sometimes seems like an oxymoron, but we represented, like you said, Georgia's environment. So we worked with River Keepers and the Sierra Club and filed clean water suits and Clean Air Act litigation. We were very much boots on the ground in the courtroom litigators, and it was a wonderful experience. I was happy doing that. And then Mayor Reed brought me over to the city of Atlanta. He and I had served in the legislature together. So I love that. And then had this opportunity, frankly, to buy my family's company from my dad's business partners. And they had all retired, including my father. And there was nobody really interested in running the company or even owning the company. It had been losing money. And so unlike a lot of 3Gers, third generation members of family businesses, I did not inherit this. I joke, I've actually got, because I've been working on merchandise, got a rubber alligator with me, a pecan log roll here. I did not grow up being groomed to be the pecan log roll heiress. This was just an opportunity that I seized. And then we can get into this more, but we're unique. Stuckeys is unique in that we fell out of family hands for decades. And so my growing up years, the company had fallen out of family hands. So I didn't grow up being groomed for this. And none of my siblings or my cousins did either. It was out of the family. So it's an interesting history.
Yeah, I spent some time reading about it, and it's a fascinating journey. Your grandfather had the orchard, and focused on the harvest, and it was your grandmother that actually came up with the confections, including the pecan log roll. Tremendous growth following World War II, but then you added the restaurants, the gas stations, and then a little bit into the as you were saying, things fell off. It turned more into a franchising, co-branding model. Talk a little bit about a little bit of this roller coaster in the 20th century, if you would, for that part of the story.
Yeah, so by the time the company came back in family hands in 1985, I was in college. And at that point, we were owned by a Chicago railroad conglomerate. We are very much a cautionary tale of what can happen to companies that are founded quite often by an entrepreneur who has an amazing vision, and the brand becomes something that people can really connect with. I think that's how most businesses become really successful, is that people relate to the brand, and they also fill a need. We filled a need when Stuckey started. There was no place else on the highway to stop. We were there even before the interstate highway, which came along in the 1950s. So we were founded in 1937. So we were the first roadside. I like to call us roadside retail more than C-stores. I think we're more of a unique experience than maybe your typical C-store. And so we have this really special quality to the stores. And then my grandfather sold voluntarily. He was getting to the point in his life where, frankly, he didn't want to keep running a company, and he sold. But we lost what was special. And the company that bought Stuckey's and got bought out by another company. And so that's the cautionary tale. When you sell, even if you sell partially to private equity, which has its pros and cons, you're losing control. So you always have to be aware. You might lose in the process what's special. And I'm just going to say it. Nobody's going to love this brand as much as I do. It's such a, right here, emotional, passionate connection, and definitely not a Chicago railroad conglomerate. And we were a line item on a balance sheet that was not performing. It was not performing because they didn't get the brand. Hello, it's all about the brand and connecting. So enough of my pedestal. My father was running 4 other companies. The company that owned Stuckey's came to my father and pretty much gave it to him. It was performing so poorly. They were hemorrhaging cash, and they were facing litigation from former franchisees. And so it just didn't make sense for it to remain in their portfolio. My father got the company back, and then he did a store within a store concept at that point, because roadside retail is extremely expensive. Owning property at an interstate highway exit, my grandfather lucked out because back in the day when they were building the interstate, he was always one step ahead and following proceedings in state legislatures and the Congress. And he knew where the highway was going, and he would get in there and he would try to get ahead of it. And so he bought land cheap. Land is not cheap on interstate exits anymore. And when my father got the company back, that was no longer the case. So he started partnering with other roadside retail operations like Wilco, which unfortunately got bought out by another company. It's a very competitive landscape. And so he would have like 250, 500 square feet of internal real estate that would be branded Stuckey. So that's how he kept the brand going from the mid 80s. Fast forward to around 2012, 2010, my father and his partners retired, and they left Stuckey's being run by a skeleton crew, and started losing money in 2016 and was operating at a deficit when I made this crazy leap into buying a failing family business. But we turned it around. Within 6 months, we started showing a modest profit. And I'm still waiting for the year-end numbers. We have to incorporate some invoices and make sure we're balancing the budget, but we are very close to getting our year-end numbers. And I think we're continuing with our steady progress with Stuckey's.
Excellent, excellent. It's interesting when you talk about the railroad conglomerate and thinking once again about, a major part of the Stuckey's position is this great American road trip.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I was actually I went online and I think about the road trip as something that sort of blossomed up around World War II, but it's very interesting. I found out that that Mark Twain, interestingly, wrote a book on road tripping back in 1872, where he took a road trip around Nevada, and then he actually went to Hawaii at one point. But anyway, there is something.
Was he went in a wagon? What was his? Was he on a horse?
I don't know what he was in, but at some point they went on a boat. They went to Nevada, and they tried to dig for some gold, and then they went to California, and then they took a boat to the Kingdom of Hawaii at the time. It wasn't even a state, but yeah,
it's a boat trip.
Yeah, it's some type of road trip, but so that was technically the first part of road trip literature. But yeah, something about that. And when somebody asks me, because they're like, why don't you just get an airplane and fly to wherever? I'm like, no, there's something about the road that we just enjoy. The freedom of it, the ability to stop at a Stuckey's and get a pecan log roll and an alligator. Part of that, when you do when you're out there doing I know you're on the road a lot, checking out the stores and the different locations. When you do some of your market research, why in 2021 do we love the road trip so much? What do you hear from your customers or focus groups or different things that you do on this front?
I don't think that's something that's changed from Mark Twain to today. I think we all have innate within us. It's just in our DNA. And I'll put out there that I think it's in our DNA as Americans, because we are blessed in this country to have wide expanses of land. Yeah. We're not like Luxembourg. We're not these tiny little countries, and that's a great country. No, I've never been there, but maybe someday. But we've got these wide expanses of land where you can get in the car and drive for days and days and explore so much. And also that each state has its own personality. Mm-hmm. And for example, I used to think that Texans were just conceited as heck. Don't mess with Texas, and always just so braggadocious. And then I went to Texas and I was like, I get it. It's an awesome state. They should be braggadocious. That state kicks ass. So you only get that sense if you get on the road. And if you're on an airplane, you can't go, oh, pull over. There's a alligator farm. There's a petting zoo. There's the world's largest belt buckle. You don't get that on an airplane. You just see tiny little dots of things. So it's really getting to know this country and getting to know the people. And I'll even say I've done quite a few of my road trips by myself. I love it when I have a companion, but that doesn't always work out scheduling wise. And it actually opens you up to meeting people, because if you're with another person, or if you're with a group, you're going to stick with who you're with. But if you're sitting there at a cafe by yourself, people will approach you.
Yep.
I was at one cafe and the chef came out and joined me and offered me a special dish that he was making because I'm a vegetarian, and I asked for something off menu, and he came out and he sat at the table and we chatted, and it was just great. And I wouldn't have gotten that sitting by myself. I mean, sitting with others. So I would just invite people, like, just do it. And it's very easy. You know, airplanes, you have to make your ticket, you have to plan in advance. Now we've got this whole pandemic. You can literally just get in your car if you've got a free Saturday and drive for 2 hours. And I've actually been exploring road trip destinations in Georgia that are just a couple of hours drive from me. It's amazing what's out there. And it's like that staycation concept. I think sometimes we just think, oh, we've really got to go halfway across the world to have this amazing experience. You really don't. You can save money and you can have fun. And you get to know your own backyard better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about pecans. Obviously,
Thank you for saying that. Pecans.
Sorry, I did that the right way. I'm glad I did that the right way. Pecans. I was doing a little research. I like pecans. Love to eat them. I did not realize that we sell about 150,000 metric tons every year in the United States. About 80% are grown in your neck of the woods in Georgia, also a little bit in, I think, Texas and so forth. A wide range of, obviously, great food, very nutritious. The oils are used for cooking. The wood is used for building stuff, very diverse. Interesting pecan facts. I know you're very interested in the health benefits. You've been focusing a lot on that, but obviously, you practice environmental law. Are there interesting things we should be knowing about pecan conservation, diseases of the pecan trees, things going on in 2021 that are important for us to realize about this important industry?
Yeah, happy to. So I say pecan. I know there's a furious debate going on. There's actually 4 ways to pronounce pecan.
Okay.
I
only know 2. Pecan and pecan, but I don't say pecan.
Pecan, yeah. So you can say pecan, 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 or pecan. So it's like all about where you place the emphasis, and none of them are the correct. I mean, they're all correct. It's often a factor of where you come from, and people always say, "Oh, a pecan's what you put under the bed to pee at night." So. I like what my grandfather used to say is they're pecans when you pick them and pecans when you sell them. Because pecan just sounds a little more refined. It's like Vidalia versus Vidalia onions. Vidalia sounds like what you'd sell in New York City, and Vidalia is what you sell in Middle Georgia. But Georgia is the #1 pecan producing state and has been since the 1950s. We had a little setback because of Hurricane Michael, which was absolutely devastating to our crops. But overall, we have consistently been the #1 producing state. And the U.S. is the #1 area for country for growing pecans. It is native to the U.S. Fun fact, it is the only snack nut native to the U.S. Unless you want to count the black walnut, which I do not. And if there are any black walnut fans listening, we can duke it out over that one. I think
I don't like walnuts at all.
Bitter.
Yeah.
It's bitter. Whereas the pecan is buttery. It just has this natural, smooth, amazing taste to it. And I'm on a mission to get the pecan off of the produce aisle and into the snack aisle. It's not just for baking. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't put it in your pies and your breads and all those other wonderful, tasty treats, but there's so much more versatility to this amazing super nut. And it's one of the healthiest nuts. It's full of antioxidants and the good fats that help you lose weight. I read that it actually has some anti-aging benefits and helps grow your hair nice and pretty. So, right? You should cure for baldness.
I'll get some more.
But it is a very healthy nut, and it's grown primarily in southeastern states. And I think also, I've talked about storytelling and connectivity earlier. A lot of us have emotional and personal connections to pecans because we grew up with them in our backyard. And that's because it's indigenous to this country. So they just crop up everywhere. And I can't tell you how many people would say they pick them from their for some reason, grandmothers seem to grow them. Their grandmother would have them in their backyard. But there's something special about just being able to relate to an experience and a story. And it's so interconnected with the culture and the history of our country because it's been around forever. The name derives from an Algonquin Native American tribe name. And I think back then they called it the pecan. No, all right, if you're a Native American expert, please call me with the correct pronunciation of it. But it comes from an Algonquin word that means nut that's hard to crack. Mm. And so it dates all the way back to our original, people who populated this country. They ate pecans, and then Thomas Jefferson grew pecans at Monticello. George Washington grew pecans at Mount Vernon. And Thomas Jefferson used to walk around with a handful of pecans in his hand. He'd stick them in his pocket, and it was the original snack mix right there. That was his afternoon snack, and he would crack them together. So you don't need a nut cracker. You just get the nuts and you squeeze them in your hand together, and it'll crack it open. And it was the original snack nut, and is very good for the environment. It does not require as much water as the almond, which is a very thirsty nut. Yep. And it's grown in drought-ridden areas like California. So when you're thinking about what's good for the environment, a native nut that is sourced close to where it's, you grow it, you process it, you retail it all in the same area, which is what we're doing in Georgia and a lot of these southern states. That's sustainable. It's a whole life cycle of the nut. It's just not the growing. It's the processing. It's the getting it to market. And it doesn't have to be imported from another country. Like the cashew is not native to this country. It's grown in other countries. So there's just so much to unpack with pecan. And most importantly, it just tastes great.
That's true. That's true. Make great pies.
Mm-hmm.
And log rolls too.
Right. And pralines.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's a rich cultural history with African Americans too, because a lot of slaves cooked with pecans. Unfortunately, in the South, it's a southern nut. It was a dish that slaves cooked with because that's what was available. Mm. And so African Americans have this deep history of baking with pecans from these recipes that date back to slavery era. And New Orleans, in particular, Creole cooking, you'll see the pecan a lot. And the praline was how recently freed slaves in New Orleans would make money. They would sell pralines that they learned how to cook, and they were cooking on plantations. They would sell that candy on the market, and that's how they started to earn an income for themselves. And so there's this whole amazing history that's intertwined with racial history of this country as well. So it's an amazing nut.
Yeah.
Take that, almond. I don't think the almond has a story like that, right?
No, the almond just drinks a bunch of water and it causes problems in California. Yeah, it's
pistachio.
Green nut.
Pistachio has a history like that, and the peanut is.
That's not a nut.
It's not a nut. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember that story.
It's a legume.
Yeah, and the Brazil nut is a seed, but we're getting away from ourselves here. No.
Well, and technically, the pecan is a drupe because it's a fruit that's grown on a tree, but it's considered a nut. But just if you want to get super, super technical, it is a drupe.
It's cool. It's cool that you know all this stuff. I like that.
There's so much more I don't know. I mean, I get around these agricultural scientists, and I am so out of my element. But
me too.
There's a great book on the pecan tree by Lenny Wells out of the University of Georgia, and I've been reading that, and so I'm trying to get to know my pecan history.
Excellent. Stephanie, on our last road trip, which was at the end of 2019, we stopped at, and I had to look on the map. I'm not sure if it was Walterboro, South Carolina, or the Brunswick, Georgia Stuckey's location.
Walterboro, yeah, those are not our best locations. I'm sorry.
We had a good time anyway.
Yeah, not our best.
Not a problem, but we had a good time. But I've been watching, in social media, you have been on the road trip, the Stuckey's road trip to check out. I'm not sure if you're looking at all the current locations or all of the other locations that used to be Stuckey's too.
Yeah,
but I know
all
you're
of
at.
them.
Okay.
If I happen to see a blue sloped roof,
Yeah.
I'm going to pull over,
Excellent.
even if it's not Stuckey's anymore.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your adventures on the Stuckey's road trip. Any really interesting stuff that has popped up as you've pulled into X or Y location? Any interesting little tidbits there that you could share?
I think one of my favorite moments at the time was a really bad moment, but it's about to turn into a great moment. So I'm giving you a little, you're getting a sneak preview of some exciting news.
Cool.
I was driving through Alabama and stopping. We have a handful of stores there, and I was visiting those stores. And then, like you said, I saw an old Stuckey's. I saw the roof, and it actually had been painted blue and red, but it was the wrong blue. It was this color blue. It wasn't the classic turquoise blue. So clearly it had fallen out of our hands. And I pulled over and it looked terrible. Somebody else had taken it over. It was so dirty. I started crying. Two of the gas pumps were completely in disrepair. When they put the plastic bags over them, it just, the place smelled bad. But there were remnants of Stuckey. It still had a Stuckey sign in front of the building. It had a big Stuckey sign. And it had two Stuckey's billboards still there, but it had not been a Stuckey's for about a decade. I followed up on it and got a little bit of the history that it was sold out of family hands about 15 years ago. So anyway, I did a post on LinkedIn using that photo, and it was right around the time of the George Floyd murder. And there was so much racial disharmony and rioting in this country. And of course, the pandemic, the economy sucks. And this was like April. That was like the worst month for just about every business except maybe Amazon. And so I post on LinkedIn a photo of that crappy looking store. And I said, I'm driving around the back roads of Alabama in search of lost Stuckey's. And I came across this, and it's a fixer-upper, but like this country, it's a fixer-upper. And I'm determined to do everything I can to bring back Stuckey's and this country. Like I want to work on bringing back both. And that post, I had been getting I'm sure you post on LinkedIn, you get like a dozen little likes, and I had like 2,000 followers or something. I suddenly just started getting messages. I was getting 100 follow requests a day. Last I checked, that post had, you get these internal metrics. It was like close to 500,000 engagements and a couple thousand likes and hundreds of comments. And I've now maxed out on the number of connections I can have on LinkedIn. And it all started from that post. That moment, it made me think, oh my gosh, there's something there. Like, I'm not the only one who remembers this brand. People were sending very personal messages. Like, I used to go, it wasn't just I would pull over and I'd get a pecan log roll. It would be one that really touched me. This guy reached out to me, and his grandfather was a civil rights lawyer and worked with Martin Luther King. And he said, Stuckey's was the only place my grandfather would ever stop because Stuckey's was never segregated. And he said, I respected that, and I wouldn't stop anywhere else on my travels. And so the grandson told me that story and told me about stopping with his grandfather. So I would get very personal stories like that. And so it just made me think, I can do this. Like, I can do this. There's a lot of people out there rooting for me, and I'm not alone. And then the exciting part of it, the postscript to this story is that about 2 months ago, the son of the couple that owned that store, he inherited the store from his dad, and he called me and he said he's interested in making a Stuckey's again. So we're making it, it's going to be a Stuckey's again. So It's not quite done. We're probably a couple weeks out, but they're stocking up. Our sales rep was just there this week. It's still a fixer-upper, but it looks a lot better. So
Beautiful story.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I love hearing.
Yeah,
stuff
so
like
I've got like 300 stores to go, 300 old Stuckey stores to go. One down, 299 to go.
Yeah, you'll get to all of them.
I want all of them. If you're an old Stuckeys, I want you. One of them's a distillery in Kansas. It looks beautiful. No, Missouri. So I think that one should stay a distillery.
What tell us a little bit about you've been making some acquisitions. You bought another a place called the Front Porch Pecans.
Yeah.
You're developing a beer with other company. Talk a little bit about some of these new products and
yeah, if anyone's listening, I'm always open to collaborations, and really, so we are very small and scrappy. When I say we're profitable, we are moderately profitable. So we're looking for partnerships with aligned brands where we could mutually support one another, not necessarily bring cash to the table, but bring our assets. We have a brand, and if we're paired with another brand that makes sense, we're totally open to that. I'm talking to an ice cream company. That makes total sense, right?
Absolutely.
A pecan log roll ice cream would be awesome. And so we paired up with a local brewery in Atlanta, Wild Heaven Brewery, and their owner, Nick Purdy's amazing, and he's creative, and he does a lot of design work as well. And their brewmaster is a horticulturalist by training. So he really understood how to get that flavor profile just right. And you could actually taste like hints of dark cherry in there. And the pecan log roll, Stuckeys, the original pecan log roll, all the others are imposters, imitators. We have cherry pieces in our nougat, which most of the other pecan log rolls do not have.
Right.
So they were able to capture that, just a hint of it in the beer. So it's a brown ale. It came out right before Christmas. We've also done some cool t-shirts and caps. So we got some merchandise going, and it's more of a dessert beer. It's not something I would say you'd want to chug with friends kind of thing. I wouldn't recommend that anyway, but it's more of a, you'll drink a one or maybe two, maybe after a meal, but it's fun. So that's one of our partnerships. And then a real like business partnership is Stuckeys merged with a snack company, Front Porch Pecans, and their founder is now the president of Stuckeys. I'm the CEO. And so we jointly run the company, and his name's RG Lamar. And you want to talk about someone who knows pecans, that's RG. He knows, he's a second generation pecan farmer, and they have, they're one of the largest pecan, he and his family has one of the largest pecan orchards in the state. And so they grow pecans, and we will soon be processing and making pecans. So he's been fabulous to work with.
Outstanding. So Stephanie, I'm right now, I'm sitting here, I live in downtown Philadelphia, city of brotherly love, home of the fictional fighter Rocky Balboa. I know you know where I'm going with this.
Oh yeah.
Read your article recently about the Rocky movies and unexpected turnarounds, which you're doing a great job of. Obviously, I have to ask you this extremely important question. And don't say Rocky 5, because that's not even on the table. Your favorite Rocky movie?
That's got to be number one. Come on.
Okay. There's only one answer to that.
I just love that. I know everyone associates that famous scene where he's climbing up the steps and he punches his fist up in the air, and that's a great scene. And certainly that very end scene where he's like, Adrian, and covered in blood, and she hugs him, I love you, like that's beautiful. But I love that punching in the meat locker when he's interviewed by the local TV station, because and Apollo is watching that, from his locker room or from his suite with all of his people around him, and the TV's in the background, and they're just kind of like barely, it's like it's like background noise. And everyone's just kind of glancing over like, who's this loser? And then Apollo's like, wait, just look at what this guy's doing. Like, he's punching in a meat locker and saw like the intensity. That's just I mean, to me, that's what it's like to be an underdog, is that you are really hungry. And then also you've got support. And that's the other thing I like about this story is most underdogs, you're not doing it by yourself. You've got a mentor. You've got people who believe in you. Rocky had his girlfriend and wife. And Burgess Meredith is just like the best coach ever. And so I have mentors. I have wonderful, experienced business leaders who donated their time to me and advised me. And so I think it's important to say, you cannot do it by yourself. You're not alone. And I'm all about free resources. I have reached out to the UGA, the University System of Georgia. I've gone through the UGA branch, has a small business development center, just amazing. They've helped me with my strategic plan. And then the Small Business Administration, I've gotten every bit of help I could get through CARES Act 1, applying for CARES Act 2. So there's lots of resources out there. There's people who want to support small businesses. And if you're a small business listening, just don't be afraid to ask. I'm certainly not. I need help.
It's a great message, and we're all rooting for you because it's a wonderful story, and really wishing you the best with all this. It's really fascinating, and for everybody that's going to be watching this episode on the YouTube channel or listening on the podcast, you've been listening to Stephanie Stuckey, Chief Executive Officer of the Stuckeys Corporation, where she has been focusing on growing the store and the brand, espousing the health benefits of Pecans, and ultimately supporting and bringing back the importance of the Great American Road Trip in our society. Stephanie, it was so good seeing you and listening to your story. I really just want to thank you for taking the time to do this. And sharing everything with us. And as we say on the show, thank you for creating a better tomorrow. And clearly that Great American Road Trip is part of that. As you say, part in our DNA, and revitalizing that is so very important, especially in the situation we find ourselves in today's world. So really thank you for that.
Thank you. Can I give a shameless shout out?
Please, take the floor, and absolutely, it's all yours.
Because our marketing director would insist on that. And by the way, I am the marketing director.
It's insistent, exactly.
When you run a small company, guess what? You can be the marketing director.
You don't want to get pulled into your office afterwards.
CEO, yes. So I'm gonna slap my own hand if I don't give a shout out to you. We are on Instagram and Twitter as Stuckeys Pecans, because that Stuckeys was already taken, darn it. We're on LinkedIn, Stuckeys Corporation, Facebook, just Stuckeys. And then me personally, feel free to follow me on any of my social media channels. Throughout the channels, except for LinkedIn, I'm at Stuckey Stop. And we just got on Pinterest. I'm building that site. Shameless plea for if anyone out there is a freelancer who knows Pinterest really well, I am looking for hourly help on Pinterest.
We will help get the message out, and we will put all the links into the bio also for the show. So outstanding. Awesome. Great seeing you.
Please follow our journey. Write comments. I read all the comments. Definitely listen to what people have to say about the brand.
Outstanding. In this case, the CEO will see the message and get back to you.
Yeah, the marketing director will be reading it.
Her too. Great seeing you.